This is a true story. A fisherman disappeared into the Pacific Ocean. Everyone believed he was dead. 438 days later, he walked out of the ocean alive. His name was José Salvador Alvarenga. Before the world knew his name, he was simply a fisherman. He had no idea that one ordinary morning would become the last normal day of his life. It was November 17, 2012. Costa Azul, Mexico. Before the world called him a survivor, Jose was simply a fisherman. He had spent years on the Pacific, long enough to respect it, long enough to understand it, and long enough to believe he knew it. Every morning, before sunrise, Costa Azul came alive. Boats were loaded, engines rumbled, fishermen headed toward the shore, ready for another day's work. For Jose, it was just another morning, another fishing trip, another promise that he'd be home the next day. The shoreline was already busy, ice packed in boxes to keep the fishes cold. Fuel tanks were checked. One by one, the fishermen prepared to leave. Waiting beside Jose was 22-year-old Ezequiel Cordoba. Around Costa Azul, most people knew him as Piñata. He wasn't Jose's usual fishing partner. That morning, he was taking another man's place. For Ezequiel, it wasn't an adventure, just another day's work. Like Jose, he expected to be home by tomorrow. The engine came to life. Slowly, the boat pulled away from Costa Azul. Behind Jose sat a large blue icebox. That morning, it had one simple job: keeping the day's catch fresh. The Pacific stretched endlessly ahead, and somewhere beyond that horizon, their lives were about to change forever. For the first few hours, everything went as planned. Jose and Ezequiel worked. The Pacific rewarded them with a good catch. By late afternoon, their boat was already heavy with fish. Then, Jose noticed the horizon. Dark clouds. Storms weren't unusual. Every fisherman had seen them. Most passed. Some didn't. Jose turned the boat toward home. But before they could outrun it, the storm arrived. Rain hammered the sea. The waves grew higher. The wind struck from every direction. Then, the engine failed. Jose tried again. Nothing. Again. Nothing. The boat was no longer going where they wanted. It was going where the Pacific decided. He reached for the radio. Silence, the GPS was gone. By morning, the storm had passed. The ocean looked almost peaceful again. Jose searched the horizon. Nothing. No coastline. No fishing boats. No rescue. Only water. In every direction. They weren't just lost. They were drifting. At first, there was hope. Jose knew people would notice they hadn't returned. Other fishermen had seen them leave. Someone would report them missing. Someone would come looking. So they waited. Every morning, they searched the horizon. Every afternoon, they searched again. Every distant shape, every dark line against the sea made them wonder. A boat, a plane, a rescue? But the horizon never came closer, and neither did help. Then one afternoon, Jose saw something. It was only a tiny shape, far beyond the waves. Then it grew larger. Ezequiel saw it too. A ship. Finally, they weren't alone. They shouted, they waved. They did everything they could to be seen. But the ship never changed course. It crossed the Pacific and disappeared over the horizon. Jose would later say it wasn't the last ship he saw, but none of them stopped. Day by day, waiting became survival. The food they had brought ran low. The drinking water, even faster. Every sip mattered. Every meal had to last longer. Eventually, waiting was no longer enough. If they wanted to live, the Pacific would have to feed them. Jose knew these waters. He knew how to catch fish, how to read movement. how to take life from the ocean. But now, he wasn't fishing for a market. He was fishing to stay alive. One day became another, then another. The Pacific became their world. Every morning, Jose searched for rain. Every day, he searched for food. Every night, they drifted wherever the current carried them. Survive today, then survive tomorrow. That became the routine. But Ezekiel was changing. He stopped eating, stopped speaking, stopped moving around. Jose caught fish, seabirds, anything the Pacific would give them. He urged Ezekiel to eat, but Ezekiel struggled. He wasn't used to eating raw animals. Day by day, his strength began to fade. Eventually, he could barely stand. One day, Ezekiel looked at Jose and asked him for a promise. "If I die, don't eat my body." It was an emotional day for Jose. It has come to this, but he gave him his word. Not long after, Ezekiel died. There was no rescue, no doctor, no final goodbye. Just the Pacific. Jose stayed beside him for days. He spoke to his body, as though his friend might still answer. But nothing changed. With a heavy heart, Jose kept the promise he had made. He did not eat his friend. Instead, he returned Ezekiel's body to the Pacific Ocean. And just like that, Jose became the only person left on a boat in the middle of the world's largest ocean. Without Ezekiel, there was no one left to talk to, no one to count the time with, no one to remind Jose what day it was. The sunrise came, then the sunset, again and again. Only the Pacific remained the same. Jose learned to live on rainwater. He learned to catch fish better, seabird and turtles. Whatever kept him alive became food. When it is sunny, it burned without mercy. There was nowhere to hide. No roof, no sail, no shelter. Only one small patch of shade, the same blue icebox that had left Costa Azul carrying ice, now shielded Jose from the endless Pacific sun. The blue box saved his life. He stopped counting weeks. Instead, Jose counted the moons. Sometimes he prayed. Sometimes he spoke out loud. Not because he had lost his mind, but because, after months alone, silence could become almost unbearable. There were days when the only living things he saw were birds. Some landed on the boat, only for a moment. Then they were gone again. Jose watched them, spoke to them, not because he expected an answer, but because, after so many months alone, even the smallest company meant something. The storm, the hunger, the loneliness finally caught up with him. Jose would later confess that it was his Christian faith that stopped him from taking his own life. After the 15th lunar cycle, something caught his attention. The birds. There were more of them now, much more than he had seen in months. Jose knew the Pacific. Birds didn't wander endlessly across the open ocean. They always returned somewhere. For the first time in months, the ocean offered him something. Hope. Jose watched them carefully. They weren't circling the boat. They were flying, with purpose, towards something. He followed them with his eyes. Far beyond the waves, a dark shape rested against the horizon. At first, he thought he was imagining it. After so many months alone, he had learned not to trust every hope. But the shape didn't disappear. Slowly, it became clearer. Not waves, not clouds. Trees, real trees. The current carried his boat closer, then closer still. Soon, he could see the shoreline, the Pacific, behind him. The boat drifted forward until it could go no farther. Jose climbed over the side. His legs barely held him. For a moment, he simply stood there, bare feet pressed into the sand. After 438 days, The ground beneath him was no longer moving. Then he looked up. People, real people. For the first time in more than a year, José Salvador Alvarenga was no longer alone. He started his journey from Costa Azul, Mexico, and found himself at the shores of Ebon Atoll, Marshall Islands. After drifting for 438 days across the Pacific Ocean, at first, many people didn't believe him. 438 days drifting alone across the Pacific Ocean sounded impossible. But investigators, oceanographers, and survival experts began examining every detail of his story. The ocean currents, his route, the condition of his boat, his physical state, even the marine life he described. One by one, the evidence pointed to the same conclusion. His journey was possible, and his story was real. José Salvador Alvarenga survived 438 days alone in the Pacific Ocean. It remains one of the longest verified survival stories ever recorded at sea. It was indeed a miracle.